Welcome to part 2 of Typewriter cleaning basics. First things first, we're going to take out the ribbon because we're about to blow out this machine using a high-powered air compressor. If you don't have access to one of these, you can use canned air, but I do recommend using safety glasses in the event that you use any type of compressed air to blow out one of these machines. If your machine is especially delicate and seems to have things falling out of it, feel free to do this inside of like a plastic bin or something like that to catch any springs or nuts, bolts, old insulation, sound insulation that is, falling out of the machine. That is a possibility. Sometimes the feet fall off. Sometimes you lose washers and you have to find out where they go later. It's a good idea to just keep track of anything that falls out of your machine. And as you blow out the machine, you can use the shift key sometimes to move the basket up and down if your machine functions like that. You can also move the carriage back and forth to blow out more foreign debris. I'm just doing a quick key check to see the function. It is still sluggish. So now I'm blowing out the case because I will be cleaning the exterior of the case in the next scene. As we move over to cleaning the exterior of the typewriter case, I'd like to point out that Crud Cutter is a bit of a harsh cleaning agent to use for this task, but it's what I had in the shop where I was recording this video. I would rather recommend to you new people and veterans alike to use a gentler soap such as Simple Green or even some dish detergent diluted in water. It would take it a lot easier on your case and clean just as effectively. As you can see, the Crud Cutter does work, but it takes up the color of the case, which was not my intention. You can see when I lift up the rag that there's some blue on there. I just rolled with it because it's what I had at the time. And I'm just taking a quick survey now of how dirty this case is so I can show you the results at the end. For the back side of this case, I'm demonstrating a slightly gentler technique of simply soaking the rag in my cleaning solution and then rubbing away the grime. This is less aggressive and less effective on such a deeply textured case such as this one for the Underwood Leader. However, you can see the corner that there's some wood poking out. The areas where the material overlaps is starting to come up. There's a little bit of stringing that's popping out there, so I wanted to go easier on this backside, and instead of scrubbing it, simply wipe it thoroughly with a rag. I think it worked out just fine, and you don't really look at the bottom of a case much anyway, so as long as it's structurally sound, not an issue. For excess grime around the handle, I'm using a brass bristled brush and spraying a little bit of my solution there, and then scrubbing it off. You can see a little bit of orange colored stuff is coming up, probably some rust from over the years, as well as just stuff settling typically on the top of a typewriter case. This is fairly common grime pattern, as it were, and it comes off easily using the brass brush, although be very sparing with your use of it because it can scuff the outside of a lot of typewriter cases. Now it's time to clean the inside of the machine. I've got a cloth underneath my typewriter because there is no bottom on this machine, so all of my solvent is simply going to fall through. I'm going to use lacquer thinner because I work in a wood shop and we have a lot of it around. It's a rather harsh solvent. You could use something gentler like an isopropyl alcohol or odorless mineral spirits works well. Another harsher solvent, if you need that, is naphtha, which is essentially lighter fluid. Although if you're going to do that, please take the necessary precautions when working with highly flammable solvents. I'm in a well-ventilated area, by the way, so make sure you do that as well. This is a great thing to do outside. So after you get your solvent in there and get it all over the segment comb, as it's called, you just want to work the individual keys and see which ones are still sticky. As you can see, the ones at the bottom of my segment comb here tend to stick more. I'm not sure why. It was just a quirk of this particular machine. It's possible that at some point in the past, someone spilled a drink on it and all of the, sugars from that beverage kind of settled down at the bottom of the segment. That is my suspicion, but I can't say for sure. Okay, now we're speeding this process up because it is just labor intensive, going across the keyboard and tapping all of the keys, making sure that you work that solvent into the what's called the bearing in between the type bar and the segment comb. Some of these keys, as you'll see in a moment, actually stick, and I'm going to show you a technique in order to correct that on the fly. A pretty easy repair, as it turns out. So here you go, one of my keys from the left is sticking, and so I'm going to gently work it and see if I can feel it rubbing either to the right or to the left hand side. For this particular key, I can feel it rubbing to the right, and so I'm going to gently bend it to the left to try and prevent it from sticking as it hits that little piece that lines up the typeface. It's still sticking, so I'm just going to bend it a little bit more. You can see I'm using one finger to do the bending. You don't want to go full Monty and bend the type bar, because then you're going to cause a lot more stress for yourself. And there you go. It's free. It is now aligned properly, and I'm just going to go through the process of cleaning each of these type bars, and if they stick, I do the exact same thing I did the first time. This one's rubbing on the left. You can see it leaning, so I'm going to push it to the right a little bit until it stops sticking itself in that little fork right there. I'd like to make a suggestion to you. I am very confident in this process, and so I'm not wrapping the exterior of my typewriter in cloth to protect it, because I'm confident that I'm going to squirt my solvent in the right place. If you have any worries about that, or you're new to the process, feel free to cover up as much of the exterior of the typewriter as you want. You can also cover the platen, as it is slightly vulnerable to solvent, but if you wipe it off quickly, I've never really had an issue with it dissolving. One of the reasons that these type bars tend to get sticky is that people lubricate the segment comb, and I can't stress enough that once you're done, like I am here, once you're done, do not lubricate the segment comb. You don't need it lubricated. The only parts of the machine you really need to lube are the carriage rails. Everything else can pretty much ride just clean and dry. Alright, once you're happy with your cleaning process, you can blow out your excess solvent. That just speeds up the drying process. Again, if you don't have compressed air, you can just simply wait for it to air dry for a few hours and you should be good to go. And now I'm just showing off that all these type bars are moving freely and everything's good to go. Later on, I will discover that some of them gum back up as they sort of drain the rest of the solvent out of them, but that's for a different video. Okay, now I am covering up the segment and the type bars because they are all clean, and I'm going to move on to the outside of the case, which features an array of dirt and sticky stuff and little white spots that are still a mystery to me to this day. As I typically start out, I go with the gentle cleaning process of wetting a rag and taking it to the exterior of this typewriter. You can see the yellow grime coming off of there. It is probably what I like to refer to as nicotine haze. A lot of these typewriters are from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. In all these eras, people smoked indoors, and that smoke and all that tar from cigarettes had to settle somewhere. And a typewriter is a great place to collect grime from nicotine and tar, and so you'll often get yellow and brown haze coming off of your typewriter. I'm just propping up the lid a little bit on a tape roll to get a better angle for filming and also for cleaning. I'm going to give you one more technique here. You can see I'm spraying crud cutter into a shallow dish. This is just a plastic lid I have lying around, and I'm using a brass bristled brush and dipping it into the solution and then scrubbing it on the surface. This keeps the moisture level at a controllable amount. I don't want things dripping off of my typewriter ribbon cover here, and so I'm just opting to dip the brush and then scrub the machine. This keeps the liquid under control, and then I can mop it up with a rag as I go. you can see it's working fairly quickly, although I'm discovering that some of these marks that I'm seeing and trying to clean are in fact damage to the finish. It is the bright shiny metal shining through the blue crinkled finish. So I believe I spent quite a bit of time trying to clean up these marks, thinking that they were whiteout. Whiteout is another common thing you'll find on a dirty old typewriter. And yeah, just more elbow grease and more time and commitment, as is the case with most antiques restoration. If you have a regular painted finish or a finish that you're worried might take damage from a brass brush, go ahead and use a plastic like nylon bristled brush. A toothbrush makes a great instrument for this particular process. And I always recommend going gentle at first if possible. You can see I'm a little bit confused as to what these bright shiny spots are, and I will continue trying to clean them because I only found out later, getting into different lighting, that that was the metal poking through. I will be aware of it for next time, and I will spend less time abrading my finish for no particular reason. And this concludes part 2 of typewriter cleaning basics. In part 3, we will try and figure out why the bell doesn't work, but as you can see, we're looking a lot better. This side had a bunch of brown splatter, which is no longer there. It's got a few white marks, we'll get those in a later video. And our segment and type bars are in a lot better shape. So stay tuned for part 3, and thank you for joining me.